Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Todd Klindt's SharePoint Netcast number 205, recorded live, finally back in my basement, but recorded live Monday, June 30th, 2014. I am your host and new bandwagon fan of the USA soccer team, Todd Klindt. I will be your host for this evening, your guide through all that is the SharePoint Netcast this evening. Before we get started, though, I have to give a shout out to the folks at Rackspace. They provided me with this PowerPoint template that we all love so much, the beautiful flag hanging behind us, and just everything. They make all this come true, all of that. And so you can help me out. You can go out to sharepoint.rackspace.com, check out all the crazy SharePoint things going on there. You can find out about our products and our services, and there's funny videos, and it's just the thing to keep in mind is that sharepoint.rackspace.com is really all things to all people. I mean, that's probably the best way to put that. So head on out to sharepoint.rackspace.com and see what they got going on. And they got that little live chat thing if you're feeling lonely, just need somebody to talk to, shoulder to cry on. Just open up a chat window there. Very, very friendly folks. They would love to chat with you. The next thing that we need to talk about as we go down the script for the big netcast is the production notes. And as you well know, the last couple of weeks have been a little crazy. So last week, and I have to apologize, Shane hijacked the show. He hijacked my email. He broke in. He got all the usernames and all the passwords, and he went live last week while I was on vacation in Mexico. And so I apologize for all that. He did a passable job. I would like to think, and I wish I would have named the netcast this. I didn't think about it till afterwards. But his netcast was passable. I'm going to say it's better than dead air. But Shane stepped up so that way you guys would have something to tide you over till I get back. And then the week before that, we were in San Antonio, so I did one from the hotel room, and that's always a big mess, and the audio was kind of crappy, and Shane messed that one up too. I think that's probably the first time Shane's been on 2 weeks in a row. And I apologize 100 times for that. I feel as bad as you guys do about all that. Fortunately, there's no Shane this week. No Shane next week. Thank goodness we're Shane free. But I do, and when I start the topics, we'll talk about this a little bit. But coming up in July, it's going to get a little funny. So we'll talk about that. But I did get Netcast number 204 published today. Sorry about that. Though I guess I did not. Now that I think about it, I didn't do the blog post. So the RSS feeds are updated. It's out on YouTube. If you'd like to get the video or the audio and just put drape a shirt over your monitor or something, you can go out to youtube.com/ToddKlindtNetcast. And that is, so normally the way when I produce these, the audio goes out first because it's the least work. And then the video goes up on YouTube, and then the video goes out in the RSS feed. So Lori would like you all to know that she reminded me to do this. Yes, Lori did remind me to put that blog post out today. I just, I forgot. Got busy doing other stuff. I was on vacation all week last week, so I was catching up on email and all that kind of stuff. But I'll get that blog post out for 204. I apologize for the production being late. I had every intention of trying to get it produced while I was on vacation, and it took like a full day. So the file that Shane produced was 5 gig, and what a tremendous waste of 5 gigabytes of space, it being a video of Shane. Oh, anyway, so he copied that 5 gig file up to, a cloud drive thing. And then I copied it down over the Resort Wireless in Mexico. And that took a really long time. Like, I started it, he got it put up there before I went to bed that night. And I started it before I went to sleep, and it wasn't done the next morning when I got up, and then was going off doing vacation-y things. And I forget exactly what we did on Tuesday, but then just didn't get back to it and got busy and kind of forgot about it. And then got home Saturday evening, and just, sitting down in front of a computer was just not something I wanted to do. So I apologize for that. Let me know what you think. Shane's not here. He's not in the chat room unless he's pretending to be somebody else. And honestly, he's not that smart. But let me know what you think. Was having a guest host, was it good? Was it better than having some dead air? Let me know. And because I got some time coming up again when we get into the topics area, we're going to talk about this. Going to have some other traveling things where normally in the past we would have just had the week off, but if having guest hosts works out, then we might work something out. Mark is asking if the thing finished before we checked out. Yeah, it finished sometime Tuesday afternoon or something, I think. But then Wednesday, my wife and I took an excursion to a place in Mexico, some Mayan ruins, like the big Mayan pyramids you always see. We went there, a place called Chichen Itza. Try to spell that one correctly the first time. And so we were gone all day for that, and then just doing vacation stuff. So time kind of got away from us. Kind of got away from me. Aaron, who is right now my favorite Netcat, my chat room hooligan, saying that Shane did a good job, but he was not as good as me. So I think that's probably the correct answer. Shane did okay, but not as good as the real thing. I think that's where we're going. But it was a good time. But I was glad Shane and I talked about that. About him doing that, the guest hosting job. And I do feel bad when there's not something going on during the week. I do, like he and I talked about the week before, the consistency is an important thing. And I do travel a lot. And as hard as I try to do these things when I travel, sometimes it's really tough, especially when I'm on vacation with my wife. That would have been a bad time to do one. So it looks like, the chat room, they seem to be, mildly warm to Shane, about as warm as he deserves, honestly. But as you're listening to this, let me know, drop me a line. You can email me at todd.klindt@rackspace.com, or you can send me a tweet at toddklindt or something like that. Jared's asking if my wife would like to guest host. I think she's not really much for this. I'm kind of the loud one. She's kind of the quiet one. She and I don't know, don't like to talk about her a lot on here because I imagine nobody gives a damn. But part of her job is doing presentations and things like that, and she hates it. And while I couldn't do any part of her job, I would love to have her job for that part, because there's presentations that she does, and she has to talk to groups of people, and I'm like, that would be awesome. I would love to do that, but she's just not wired that way. So, but Shane seems to do it, so we'll talk about that. But again, production was kind of slow. Hopefully, I'll get this one out a little sooner. So on to the topics. So we've got a couple of folks here from the Australia, New Zealand area. One guy's even got New Zealand in his handle, which is good because that makes it easier for me to keep track of who's who. But in 2 weeks, so 2 weeks from today, I will be in Australia. I'll be in Sydney for the ShareThePoint Conference. And that's kind of a big deal down there. I did the Sydney one last year. I went down to Sydney for the week and spoke at that conference and had a blast. This year I'm going back. I'm doing the Sydney conference, which is call it the second week of July 15th and 16th. And then I'm going over to Auckland, New Zealand the next week and doing the conference over there. So I bring that up for a couple of reasons. Number one, because I get to meet Chris, who in the chat room is Chris Mainland NZ. So he is probably I'll have to say my second favorite Kiwi named Chris. Chris Johnson's probably my first. But I get to do all that kind of fun stuff. But this impacts you guys in a couple of ways. First, if you are one of my listeners or viewers and you're in the Australia or New Zealand area, specifically Sydney or Auckland, and you would like to go to the ShareThePoint conference but just can't get a pass for whatever, boss won't pay for it, you've had bake sales, haven't been able to raise enough money, whatever, the folks at the ShareThePoint conference have allowed me to give away one pass. So I can give away a pass to one lucky Aussie or Kiwi that would like to go to the conference and isn't already signed up. If you're already signed up, I can't get you a refund or anything like that. But if you would like to go and won't be fired for not showing up for a couple of days, if you would like to go, and we had some questions about this in the chat room before the thing started. This is only a pass. Travel. We had a few folks here from the U.S. Wanted to be involved in that because they thought I was going to be paying for travel. No, I'm just letting you in the door. You got to find your way to the Langham or the Sydney Hilton, all on your own. But if you're in the area and want the pass, shoot me a note. Let me know. So I used to give a lot of stuff away on this Netcast, and I haven't done much of that in the last couple of years. Not because I don't like to give stuff away, I do, but trying to figure out how to determine who to give it to is tough, and then shipping it and all that kind of stuff has been tricky. And so, true to form, being consistent with that, I really have no idea how I'm going to determine who gets this. So, if you would like to be considered for the pass, and again, this is just the pass, and it is only if you haven't signed up. No refunds are being issued for this. If you would like me to consider you for that, send me an email. Now, this is a different email address, and that's just because I didn't want it to get lost and all the other stuff. So if you would like to be considered for the pass, email me at todd.klindt@gmail.com. todd.klindt@gmail.com. And put something in the subject line so that I know what the content is, and then just let me know who you are and why you want to go. And so what I will do is Lori suggested putting the names in a hat, and I have a hat right here. My daughter's got me this hat for vacation, so Lori suggested maybe I take this hat, put the names in a hat, have one of my kids draw it out or something. That's a good idea. Aaron in the chat room is suggesting a PowerShell script. I like that. That's also a good idea. But that's the thing. I don't know how I'm going to decide how to do that. Joanne Klein in the chat room brings up an interesting point. Yeah, so I think I'll need to know, who you are, why you want to go, and then your bank routing number and account number. I think that's really going to help me decide who gets to go. Is that thing? So Mark's suggesting, yep, a get random. So I've done that before at I think at the SharePoint conference when Shane and I did the PowerShell session. We normally play heads or tails at the beginning of a session to give stuff away, but since we were doing the PowerShell session, we did, heads, tails, pipe, get random, and did it that way. So that's also an option too. So if you're considering that, again, I'm going to use my Gmail account to keep everything separate. So that's todd.klindt@gmail.com. Put something in the title like, I want the pass, or you're better looking than Shane, or Todd Klindt for president, something like that, so that I know. And then I think I will probably, so I would like to be able to announce this by next Monday, because that's a week ahead of time. So let's say that I need to have your email by 7:30 Central Time next Monday. So 7:30 Central U.S. time, the 7th, and that's going to be 10:30 a.m. on Tuesday the 8th. For Sydney, and I don't know what the time zone is for Auckland, but 8:30 GMT plus 5 or 6, I forget what we are right now, and I'll put that in the show notes or something. But send me an email, todd.klindt@gmail.com, and I'll figure something out. I don't know. This will not be audited by any of the big accounting firms. It might be fixed. Who knows? I might already know who I'm going to give it to. Just playing along. Who knows? But so I'm going to be talking there at that conference. So that's going to be a good time. I'm going to be doing my session on load balance or load testing with Visual Studio. Going to be doing a session on PowerShell with SharePoint Online. And Joanne is asking, if we spam your Gmail account with multiple emails, do we get our name put in more than once? Well, Joanne, you're in Canada, which is a super duper long ways away from Sydney or Auckland. But I hadn't decided that. This is why I don't do these contests. Let's say 1 entry per person. Yeah, so email me at todd.klindt@gmail.com. Give me your name, why you want to go. Get it to me by an hour before I go live next week, which is like 10:30 AEST or 7:30 Central, and 1 entry per person. Yeah, that's good. I appreciate you bringing that up. But anyway, so I'm going to be down there, going to be doing those 2 sessions. And also, I talked to the folks at the Sydney SharePoint user group. John Liu is in the chat room here. Ivan Wilson is the other guy that I talked to. And I said, hey, you guys, last year you lowered yourselves and let me speak at your user group while I was in Sydney. What do you say we go 2 for 2 and you let me do it again? And they foolishly agreed to it. And so that Tuesday night, which is the 16th or whatever, 15th. So that, I think it's the 3rd Tuesday. Yeah, so I think it's the 15th. The Sydney SharePoint user group, I'll be presenting there. And it looks like I'm going to be doing a presentation on troubleshooting tips. So just things that I've done over the years to, as I'm trying to hone in on a problem and be talking about tools that I use and techniques that I use and things like that. So if you're going to be in Sydney and you haven't already gotten sick of me at the conference, you can go to the Sydney user group. And I think I don't remember what the URL is, but if you just Google Sydney SharePoint user group, it's the first hit. Or if you're not going to be at the conference, but you're in Sydney anyway, swing on by and say, hey. So thanks to those guys for letting me do that. Okay, so let's move on to some actual content, like the thing that you guys all showed up for. And the first one has kind of a nice segue here, a nice tie-in. A buddy of mine from Australia, Brian Farnhill, who now works for Microsoft down there in the Australia area, had a blog post a couple weeks ago that I wanted to talk about, which was a good one. Brian's a good guy. When I was in Australia last year, he taught me about drop bears. If you've not been to Australia and you don't know about drop bears, they're an important thing to know about. They're very scary, so you must know about drop bears. Brian hooked me up. We were walking to dinner one night, schooled me on drop bears, so I appreciate that. And so now his blog post here is a good one about, he taught me a little bit about the distributed cache service. And basically, I won't steal all of his thunder, but basically he had a farm where everything was taking a really long time, and did some troubleshooting, and turned out there were a bunch of distributed cache errors. Every request was getting a distributed cache error. So he kind of traced it down. What he found out was that there are 2 IIS groups that SharePoint accounts normally have to be in. One of them is the WSS WPG, which is Worker Process Group, and the other one is the WSS WPG Worker Process Group Admin. And what he found was that the distributed cache accounts were in there, the farm accounts were in there, the web app pool accounts were not. And he added the web app pool account to the WSS worker process group on the distributed cache servers, and that made his requests come through about 30 times faster. So I don't know the whole history of the problem, how his stuff was configured or anything like that, but this is one of those things where it's always good, even when you think everything's running fine, to kind of have the ULS logs open, check things out. If you're getting this string of distributed cache errors, then you can try to chase them down, and maybe you've got this problem and you don't even know it. So maybe you can kickstart SharePoint 2013 and cut your response times down a little bit. So Brian Farnhill, good blog post there. Doug's asking, how did the web app pool get excluded from the WSS worker process group? My guess, and it's been I guess that blog post came out a few days ago, but it's been a while since I read it, but I think he had dedicated distributed cache boxes, so I'm guessing he did not have the SharePoint Foundation web application service instance running, which is probably what adds those to that worker process group. Haven't checked that out myself. I don't know if it's not spelled out in that blog post. I'll follow Brian. I'm going to see him in a couple weeks for sure. But I thought that was a good one because it's just one of those things, everybody says, SharePoint's slow. So, when someone says, hey, SharePoint's slow, and you're like, yeah, I know SharePoint's slow. And they're like, no, it's even slower than SharePoint normally is. SharePoint's normally slow. It's even worse. So this was one of those funny, no, SharePoint was really slow this time. It wasn't SharePoint slow. But thanks to Brian for that one. The next one, this one came out. This is something that our developers here at Rackspace had some problems with. We designed some custom change your password stuff, using SharePoint apps and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that you're supposed to be able to do is define locations for custom error pages in SharePoint 2013. Bad password, things like that. And our developers were assigning them. Near as I could tell, assigning them correctly. SharePoint was just flat out ignoring them. And so they found some workarounds. Our developers are not bad guys. They figured that out. Well, in the April 2014 cumulative update for SharePoint 2013, they fixed that. And so now, if you've got code that wants to grab some of those custom errors, now supposedly it'll actually work. I've not had our developers go back and check that yet, but it looks like that's fixed. I know our guys pulled their hair out with it, so I wanted to pass that along to some other folks. And we got a couple people in the chat room who were like, "Oh man." Yeah, and so Doug in the chat room, Doug Hemiger, is saying that they ended up overwriting the default error page, the IIS error page, and I think that's what our guys did too. It was pretty ugly. I know it was just a horrible hack, and we've set that in. We've got multiple test environments. We got it going. Had to do this horrible hack, and then set up another test environment a few months later. And we couldn't remember how we'd done it because it was such a terrible kludge. So I had to take some time, kind of tracing it back on our production boxes to figure out how we got that. Excuse me. And then I took a screenshot of it and saved it in a spot where I save all my screenshots so that the next time this comes up in however many months, we don't have to try to figure out how that happened again. But if you if this has been a problem, and it looks like it has been for Doug, if you don't listen to my Netcast regularly, this has been out for a while now. There's a couple of ways that you could have found out about this. Number one is you could be checking my SharePoint builds page and just kind of perusing through there. And of course, that's at www.toddklindt.com/SP2013builds. So you could go through there. One of the things that I've done, and just started doing this a couple of weeks ago, well, maybe a month ago, is I use the service on the web to subscribe to web pages, and it emails me when those web pages have been changed. So that's kind of a crappy workaround for the fact that you guys can't get alerts on my website. But now I've got it set up on a couple of pages on my blog, and especially like the cumulative update pages, so that if I go out and change them, then you get an email. So when I went out and added that bit about the custom error pages, and it looks like I added that on, oh, don't tell me this one. Looks like I added that bit on the 20th. So then on the 20th or 21st, you would have gotten an email that said that had been changed. So I know, so I've been threatening this for like a year now. I'm going to be updating my blog to SharePoint 2013. And hopefully at that point, I've thought about having some custom authentication providers so people could sign up for, alerts and stuff like that. But in the meantime, one of these, web page change places is probably the best idea. And I don't have it in front of me which one I'm using. I can talk about that next week. But that's a good way. You could set it on that builds page itself so that when I start adding builds, you can see them, or on individual patches. The other way that you could find out is you can follow me on Twitter at SP2013builds, scratch that. I'll bleep that out in editing, at SP2013patches. And every time I update any of the pages for patches or update patches or whatever, I send out a tweet. So you can follow that Twitter account and see when I add stuff too. So I look forward to playing with that a little bit and seeing if that actually works the way it's supposed to. Doug doesn't think I'm ever going to update my blog to SharePoint 2013. Your lack of faith in me kind of hurts my heart a little bit, Doug. Going to be honest with you. So, that's not what I meant to do. Got all excited. Got a tweet from a buddy of mine, and this was a local guy. This is weird. He's got my phone number and stuff. He could have just called me. But he is going through my backlog of SharePoint netcasts, and he was listening to netcast number 77. Netcast number 77 was 3 years ago. Anywho, in Netcast number 77, I talk about how I like to install the SQL Management Studio on one of my SharePoint boxes. Doesn't matter which one, but one of my SharePoint boxes, so that if I need to do some SQL-y stuff, I can just be on a SharePoint box and do it. because in some environments, like there's a Windows team that builds the boxes and there's a SQL team that runs that part. And if you're the SharePoint person, or heaven forbid, the SharePoint consultant that's helping the SharePoint person, and you want to log into the SQL box to look at some setting or something, they freak out. They will not allow it to happen. And so I discovered a long time ago that it's just easier to install the SQL tools on a SharePoint box, the management tools, and then get in that way. Now, in some cases, you can't do that either because there are, rules in that. So then I use another program called Query Express, and I've talked about that one before. It's just a standalone query tool that you can go do queries with, T-SQL stuff. But my buddy Keith was listening to Netcast number 77 from 3 years ago and said, hey, that's a great idea. You're the smartest guy I know. He actually said that. And coming from Keith, I'm saying. But his question was, does it have to be on a SharePoint box, or can it be on my workstation? And my response to him was, workstation is fine. That works. The idea is that you don't have to RDP into the SQL box to get to Management Studio. But the workstation gets a little weird because then there's permission issues. So you need to do the crazy right-click run as or whatever, because if you're on the SharePoint box, you're probably logged in as a SharePoint account of some sort, which probably has permissions to SQL, and on down the line. If you're logged into your workstation, you're probably logged in as, a dead, just a regular user, which doesn't have permission. So that gets a little tricky with SQL Server Management Studio, but it should work just fine. So there's a couple of ways that you can get this done. Number one is you can just run a regular SQL install, like if you were installing SQL Server, but then when you get to the page that says what do you want to install, you just pick the management tools. Management tools complete, next, finish. You don't get any database engine stuff or any of that. You just get the Management Studio. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is Jeff Jones in the chat room mentions it. You can download the SQL Server Management Studio Express package. It's just the management tools. I've kind of found that to be a pain in the butt. I don't necessarily do that. I just run the SQL install and be done with it. Doug Hemiger tried to look like a tough guy and say that he does all his SQL stuff through PowerShell, but nobody believes that. He's fibbing. SQL's PowerShell is ugly, just flat out ugly. Not a fan at all. But those, it's good to have those tools available so you don't have to get into the SQL boxes and fight the DBAs and try to figure out what gifts to give them, and I don't know. It's ugly. But again, just goes to show that this Netcast is as fresh and timely today as when it was recorded 3.5 years ago. The bits of wisdom that you get are timeless in their value. And I think if you haven't already, listened to every single episode start to finish, not too late to start, folks. Every episode is still out there, I believe. Though there was the big crash a couple of years ago, I think I copied them all out there. But yeah, I think they're all there. So go ahead, get your download on and grab all those episodes. So speaking of SQL, I saw this come out last week, and I thought this was kind of a neat idea. This is just a little SQL script. It was a blog off of TechNet, and I've forgotten the guy's name. But it's just a little SQL script that you can run that will just put a bunch of data into SQL. And there's a couple of things that you can use this for. One of them is if you want to just have some databases to, maybe you want to mount something up with BCS or whatever, just having data out there. But the other thing that you can use this for is to generate activity. So if you want to generate load or something on your SQL box, or practice using SQL Profiler a little bit, one of those kind of things. It's just some T-SQL scripts that just generate a bunch of tables, and I think it, tell it 1 to 1,000, it generates 1,000 rows or something like that. And kind of a fun thing. There's been a bunch of times in my career as a SharePoint guy that I've wanted to do this, and so Jose here put a blog post together that does that for me. So just one of those things you want to, we've all got like a folder of favorites in IE or Chrome or wherever of little snippets, things that we may need. I do that in OneNote now because of how crazy cool OneNote is. But this is just one of those things that you can add to your toolbox. And the next time you need to generate some tables for stuff or whatever, it's a pretty simple script, so you can probably bend it to your will a little bit, but looked kind of handy. I look forward to needing that at some point. This next topic was one that has been incredibly painful for us at Rackspace, and it took a while, and apparently this has been an issue for a couple of weeks now, and we just hadn't realized it. The latest version of Firefox, Firefox 30, for non-Windows hosts, so mainly Macintosh or Mac, but Linux, I guess. Firefox 30 breaks access to NTLM sites on non-Windows boxes. So here's what is not the problem. If you're sitting in front of a fancy Windows 8.1 workstation and you're too cool to use IE, you got the hipster glasses on and all that, maybe a cool hipster hat like this one, and you want to be counterculture, and if you're on Windows and you download Firefox 30, you will get to your SharePoint sites just fine, and you just won't know what the hubbub's all about. If, however, you're sitting next to one of those guys, do we still make beret jokes about Mac users? I can't remember. We'll say that we do. So you're sitting next to one of those guys, you got your hipster hat on, he's got his beret on, and he's sitting in front of some fancy Mac, and he also loads up Firefox 30. He will not be able to get into SharePoint if you're using NTLM authentication. Starting with Firefox 30, they have disabled NTLM version 1 inside of the browser. Naomi saying I need a beard. Naomi, I don't think I could have a beard grown. I could never shave before I die, before the day I die, and I could still never have a beard. Just not how that works. But if you're on a Mac or a Linux box and your SharePoint sites are using NTLM, you can't get in with Firefox 30 now after the update. Now what you can do, and that was very sad. SharePoint likes Mac users. SharePoint likes a little less Linux users, but it likes them nonetheless. But now they can't get in. The good news is I've got a blog post in the show notes here that talks about how you can fix it. But essentially you can go back into Firefox 30 on your non-Windows platform and turn NTLM v1 back on, and that will get you back into SharePoint. Jack brings up an interesting thing. He said that on the Mac, Firefox has lost, and Chrome is the secondary browser of choice. I would say that's the case in Windows too. I normally have IE and Chrome up. I will say though, once I moved everything to Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8, I almost never use Chrome now because of how tightly everything is integrated on Windows 8. So that, but if you're on non-Windows platforms and if all of a sudden SharePoint doesn't work, it's not SharePoint's fault. It is IE. So Trevor in the chat room just had a coronary. I think a blood vessel in his head just popped. He's like, no, don't use NTLM v1. Remember, this is all non-Windows, Trevor. So if you're jumping up and down, you're slamming your hands on your desks, breathe, take a breath. If you're on Windows and you're using Firefox 30, it will automatically bump to NTLM v2. There is no problem. If you're not on Windows, NTLM v1 is your only option. Somebody call Trevor's wife and have her check on him. I'm not sure if he's still alive. He may have hyperventilated to death. Okay. So I want to throw that one out there because that one has thrown a few of our folks for a loop. And our support folks are having problems with it too because people are like, I can't log into SharePoint. And it wasn't SharePoint. It was crazy. So check that one out. All right. Another one I wanted to talk about was a little blog post that came out a couple of months ago that I recently stumbled on doing some research for something else. And it is a blog post on choosing a sign-on model for Office 365. So basically this thing talks about the different ways to set up your authentication to your SharePoint Online sites. And you've got a bunch of different things. But the reason that I bring it up is because if you've been considering doing one of those fancy hybrid environments that you've heard so much about, maybe you were at TechEd and saw my session on using OneDrive for Business and wanted to, do the hybrid thing with SharePoint 2013 and Service Pack 1 and OneDrive for Business and all that stuff. This blog post talks about all those different methods. So if you want to use DirSync or Federation or whatever, those are the kind of decisions you want to have in place before you do this hybrid environment with SharePoint 2013. So it was a good blog post for that. I was talking about how this was a good, this worked through the sign-on models for Office 365. Doug has volunteered to be the sign-on model. I'm afraid that is just unacceptable. It's a good thing that I haven't eaten in a while. I probably would have lost my lunch. Your body proportions aren't right. You're hairy in all the wrong places. Boy, I can't say enough bad things about you being a model, Doug. Just can't do it. But if you're thinking about doing the hybrid environment with SharePoint 2013 and Office 365, that's a good paper to read. And even if you're not yet, it's a good one to read through, just to kind of get an idea as you're planning, because we're all planning projects a year ahead of time, and so it's just kind of a good idea to see what the options are out there. This was an interesting one, that new topic here, an interesting one that came across my desk in the last week. Microsoft has published a TechNet article that basically says, don't use the $sign in your SharePoint 2013 service accounts, dummy. So I guess I'd not seen that come up, where people wanted to put $signs in their service account names, not the password, mind you, the name of the account. But I guess it comes up, and I guess it doesn't work. So they've got a TechNet article that talks about that. I haven't done it yet, but I will add a link to that to my SharePoint 2013 service accounts guidance page. And you can find that at www.toddklindt.com/SP2013 service accounts. And that lists all the service accounts that I use when I set up SharePoint 2013 farms, what permissions they need, what they do, all that kind of stuff. And so now I'll add this guidance that you should not put a $sign in the name, the username of your account. Again, not the password, the name of the account. Jared in the chat room is thinking that it wasn't probably even allowed. I've never tried. It's never come up. I like to put, on the heel of my Mexican vacation, I like to put the upside down exclamation mark in all my service account names. Trevor Seward is suggesting that it has something to do with PowerShell, because it's tough to escape some of that stuff. I would guess it's tough. It's not undoable. I've done it before, but it makes things tough. But I wanted to throw that out there. I've got the service account page, and just wanted to make sure that that you all knew about that, in case you're one of those weird folks that's putting $signs in your service accounts names. Again, not the password, the actual name of the account. Oh my God. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about is, so Naomi Moneypenny is in the chat room, and so she's saying she can't use her gangster name, $sign. Well done, Naomi. I like it. I like it. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was, I've been playing with this little Dell Venue 8 Pro here for a while. Big fan. Use it every day. Every day I do something on this little guy. 8 inches of just pure Windows fun. Can't say enough good things about it. Love it to death. Now, one of my more popular, oddly, blog posts has been a blog post on how to charge this little devil when you've got when you've got USB devices attached. So the issue with this is it's very tiny, and it only has one USB port on it right there. And that USB port is for charging. So you would charge with a regular micro USB, but it also uses a special cable called USB on the go, or USB OTG to its homies, to connect devices. The problem becomes, if you want to charge it and connect a device, there's only one port. You can't do both. And so a few months ago, on a forum, one of the forums, I forget which one it was, it looks like Tablet Review, somebody had this cacophony of of cables that you could use, and I actually happen to have mine sitting right here. So there's my my rockin' SharePoint 2007 USB thing, and you hook the charger up here, and then you hook this into the Dell Venue 8 Pro, and there's a switch here in the middle, and then you got to stand facing the west and stand up on your right foot, not your left foot, and your right foot, and then you can charge it while you're using a USB device, like a fantastic SharePoint 2007 key. But it's kind of kludgy and it's kind of rough to use and all that kind of stuff. But I've been doing it, and that blog post, I mean, there's such a need for that. That blog post has been huge. That blog post now is my second most popular blog post after my SharePoint 2013 service accounts blog post. But recently, the company that makes the dock that I use for my service, or my Surface Pro, Plugable, P-U-G-A-B-L, they are thinking about making a dock for the Dell Venue 8 Pro that does the charging and the USB device stuff. And I think that's great. And they did a really smart thing where they put a Kickstarter campaign out. So they're not going to, devote all the research and development into it. They did a little proof of concept. They showed that they could do it. But before they actually start figuring everything out, they want you to put up or shut up. So they've got a Kickstarter campaign if you would like a pluggable dock for the Dell Venue 8 Pro, and it also works with the Lenovo Mix, I guess. They'll plug into this one hole here and charge and have USB devices. And so I thought that was great. I thought it was a great idea. People don't get to whine about it anymore. If you don't, if you want this, just go out to the Kickstarter campaign. So it's been out for a week or so now, and I think the lowest. So if you actually want the dock, the lowest you can pledge $65, and that will get you the actual dock when it's done. And I think that's great. I think that's a great idea, doing the whole Kickstarter for new products, because that way they don't have such upfront thing and then nobody buys it. And so I think it's great. So I pledged my $65, and so I'm waiting for that. It looks like that will not be available till like maybe November or something. So in the meantime, I will be using my my cables here. So I'm a big fan of that. It's been a great little device. I'm so glad I got one. It's been good. So in the chat room, Jack was talking about not using it. When I travel, when I'm on planes, I got this thing loaded up with movies and TV shows and MP3s and all that kind of stuff. And I use it for that. I use it for everything. I got the Kindle app on here. It's better for like checking my email and stuff than my phone and all that. So Jeff Jones liked the idea that I called this a cacophony of kludge, and I kind of like that too. It's kind of alliterates and all that. There's a great speed metal band called Cacophony, so I always try to work that name in wherever I can. So I'm looking forward to that, and I like these little scrappy companies like Plugable that fix these niches. I like that. So that's good stuff. But the Dell Venue 8 Pro, I think you can get the 32 gig model for like $250, something like that. I forget exactly what. This is the 64 gig model. I would recommend the 64 gig model. 32 gigs for Windows 8 is kind of tight. Now, Windows 8.1 supports this ability to run from a compressed file. I haven't played with that yet, so you might be able to use that. But I would really get a 64 gig model if you could. So, and I didn't even think about it. I've got some other Dell Venue 8 Pro tips and stuff that I just haven't talked about yet. Maybe I'll do that next week. We kind of ran along this week. So, well, that is all the topics. Let's move on to the shameless self-promotion. I still need to come up with a theme song for this, or maybe do the echo thing where it's a shameless self-promotion, something. So the next thing here in 2 weeks, I will be in Sydney. We've kind of talked about that a bunch. The 15th and the 16th, I will be in Sydney at the Hilton at the ShareThePoint Conference. And then that Monday, that Tuesday night, I'll be at the Sydney SharePoint User Group. The next week, I will be in Auckland, New Zealand, the 22nd and 23rd for the ShareThePoint Conference there. As always, I talk about this all the time. If you're at one of these conferences, don't be shy about coming up and saying hey to me. I'm a pretty approachable guy. Don't at all be embarrassed. I would love to hear from you. I honestly would. Talk, and I don't even know how you do this, but talk to anybody who's ever come up to me at a conference or whatever, and I'm a pretty friendly guy. So by all means, talk to me. Doug's talking about what else I'm going to do in Sydney. I went to a bunch of stuff last year, and I went to Sydney Opera House and all that kind of stuff. What I didn't do is climb the Harbor Bridge. So that's the big, if you saw it, you'd recognize the picture, but you can actually climb up the thing. I would love to be able to do that, but I think I'm afraid to do that. But you have to plan that in advance, and it costs a couple $100 or something like that. And and so maybe that I'm going to be working there, going to be talking to customers and just kind of hanging out. So if you're in the Sydney area, want to get lunch or something, give me a shout. So talking about how I'm approachable, Lori's like, yep, he's pretty approachable. I gave me a big hug the first time I met him. Trevor Seward's talking about how approachable I was even in my hotel room. For those of you that haven't been watching this forever, I don't even remember when it was, Trevor, 2.5 years ago. I was in Seattle, and Trevor and I went out for dinner, and then he came back to my hotel room when I recorded my Netcast. So he was actually in the hotel room for it. I don't remember which Netcast that was, but I would like to think that I have a very gentle touch, but yes, very very approachable. But yeah, you by all means, and I know how this is because, man, I have nerd crushes, and I remember the very first time that I was at the New Media Expo in January of 2013, and Leo Laporte was there. Oh my God, Leo Laporte. I've been watching Leo Laporte for like 10 years, probably 12. Oh, I got to go up and say, I can't say hey. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. He probably hates this. I want to say hey. I want to say hi to Leo. Oh my goodness. I'm just going to do it. And I went up and I went up and said hey. And he was very friendly and very gracious. And I ended up being on Windows Weekly a couple months later and all that. I absolutely understand how it can be tough to come up to a complete stranger that's never met you and introduce yourself and expect them to act like you're, a long lost friend. I understand that. I'm saying do it. If you see me there standing around, come up and say hey. I promise it'll be okay. So if you're going to be in Sydney or Auckland, do that and come and say hey. Then gonna be home here for a couple of weeks, and then in September I will be out at SP TechCon in Boston. That's September 16th through the 19th. Looks like Shane and I will be doing an upgrade session, like a half-day thing, and then doing a PowerShell session and doing just kind of an admin tricks and tips, that kind of stuff. And that will be downtown Boston. I don't remember the exact location, but you can go to sptechcon.com and find out all the details on that. And that is September 16th through the 19th in Boston. And then a couple of weeks later, boy, September's a busy month, I will be in Stockholm, Sweden, and I'll be doing the SharePoint Exchange Forum. I don't even remember how many of those that I've done. It's been great. Jorn Huisman's the guy that puts on a tremendous conference and is always very gracious and lets me come over. That is September 29th and 30th, and I'm also doing my load testing with Visual Studio session there, and then an upgrade session. And that might be all the conferences that I'm speaking at this year. That's all that I know about. I'm not sure. Folks in the chat room are talking about coming up and saying hey and being creepy. Man, I'm like 6 foot tall. I'm like 230 pounds. I'm not freaked out by stuff like that. Come up and say hey. I think in the chat room, probably the only person bigger than me is Jared. Doug might be close, but no, I don't. It's all good. None of you guys creep me out. I'm a nerd. I know how this is. Don't worry about it. So that is all I have for this week. Thanks everybody. Ran long, but that's good. Got in here. Shane didn't take all my stuff, all my topics last week, so that's good. Next week we'll be back here next week. 2 weeks after that, so the first week that I'm in Sydney, I've talked to Shane about filling in for me. That's on the 14th. He is also going to be traveling. He's going to be at the Worldwide Partner Expo, Microsoft's Worldwide Partner Expo in Washington, D.C. And so he needs to figure out what his schedule is going to be that Monday night and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if there will be a Netcast that day. And the other thing is, so that is, and the way this always works is I will have just gotten into, well, I guess it'll be the Tuesday. So for me to do the Netcast from Sydney, it would be in the middle of the conference, and I don't know what my schedule is going to be like, and I don't want to take time away from the conference for that. So I don't know if there will be one on the 14th, but Shane has committed to doing one on the 21st. So for sure there will be one that day. So thanks everybody. Again, if you've got feedback, good, bad, otherwise, hit me up at Todd Klindt on Twitter or todd.klindt@rackspace.com. Let me know what you think, suggestions for topics, suggestion for production, whatever. Just let me know. I'd love to hear your feedback. So thanks again to the chat room. You guys have been hysterical as always, inappropriate, disrespectful, flat out rude sometimes, and hysterical. I appreciate it. And thanks to all you guys that do the downloads. I appreciate that too. And I will talk to you next week.